Emma had always been sensitive to other people's problems. I knew it from the very beginning. Her ability to support and comfort others was what made me fall in love with her. But lately, it seemed like her kindness had found a new focus. Her colleague, Mike. I noticed how she started mentioning his name more often. As if casually, she would talk about how he was going through a crisis in his relationship with his wife. At first glance, nothing special. Just a regular conversation. But something in her voice would change when she spoke about him. A slightly softer tone, longer pauses, as if she was carefully choosing her words. One evening, when I asked her why she was so concerned about Mike, she gave me an embarrassed smile and said, "He's just a good person. I feel sorry for him." But why did it bother me? Was I jealous? Or was it just my imagination? I tried to brush off these thoughts like an annoying fly, but the doubt had already lodged itself in my mind like a rusty splinter. The next morning, while getting ready for work, I noticed Emma checking her phone. Her lips twitched into a slight smile, but she quickly hid the screen. I kept telling myself it was just her natural empathy. Emma had always been good at empathizing with people. I knew that from day one. Maybe she just felt sorry for Mike? We'd been together for 8 years and I was used to her compassion. Probably I was just overreacting. But one evening I caught her in the kitchen, typing a message, smiling faintly. My heart tightened. I didn't want to show jealousy, but I couldn't hold back. "Is it Mike again?" Emma laughed, shaking her head with a hint of embarrassment. "He just asked for advice. Things are tough with his wife." Her answer should have reassured me, but somehow it didn't. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. But every time I remembered her smiling at her phone, something inside me trembled like a stretched string. Maybe I just didn't trust people the way she did. Or were my concerns justified? I tried to distract myself, convincing myself that trust is essential in any relationship. But the image of her smiling at her phone wouldn't leave my mind. The next day, I decided to do something I'd never done before, show up at Emma's work unannounced. Just to make sure everything was fine and shake off this heavy burden of suspicion. That morning, I felt on edge. Every message from her seemed suspicious, even if it was casual and lighthearted. I tried to calm down, convincing myself it was just my imagination. But the anxiety kept growing like a snowball. When I called her, Emma answered cheerfully. "Hi. What's up?" "Oh, nothing, just wanted to see how you're doing," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Everything's fine. Mike and I are having lunch, discussing his problems. He's having another conflict with his wife." I froze for a second, feeling a tightness in my chest. It sounded innocent, but deep inside, something stirred. It's normal to help a friend, right? Or is it not entirely? I didn't probe further, not wanting to show my anxiety. But the thought had already gripped my mind like a rusty splinter. Something didn't add up. I still decided to drop by, even though I knew I might seem paranoid. Maybe seeing her in person would help me calm down. When I arrived at her office, I noticed her car wasn't in the parking lot. Strange. I walked inside, greeted the receptionist, and asked, "Is Emma around?" "Oh, she went to meet a client," the girl replied without looking up from her screen. It took me a moment to process her words. "A client?" But she mentioned lunch with Mike. "Do you know when she'll be back?" I asked, trying to hide my confusion. "No idea," the girl shrugged. "She said she might be late." I stepped outside, trying not to think the worst. Questions whirled in my mind. If it was a client meeting, why didn't she mention it? Why say it was lunch with Mike? Maybe her plans changed at the last minute? When Emma came home, I calmly asked about work. "How was your day? Did everything go well with the client?" She paused for a moment but then smiled. "Yes, it went fine. The client insisted on a face-to-face meeting. I couldn't refuse. It went well." She spoke confidently, as if nothing unusual had happened. I tried to find even a hint of a lie in her eyes, but nothing. She looked at me as openly and calmly as always. But inside, something tightened. The first lie. Small, almost unnoticeable, but still a lie. Why didn't she tell me right away? Maybe she just didn't want to deal with extra questions? Or was I really starting to lose control over my trust? That night, I lay in bed for a long time, listening to her steady breathing beside me. She slept peacefully as if nothing had happened. And I kept wondering, am I really that jealous? Or is my intuition hinting that something has gone wrong? After that incident, something changed. It was as if an invisible wall had arisen between Emma and me. She stopped talking about Mike as if she had sensed my tension and decided not to provoke it. But instead of relief, I felt growing unease. Her conversations became short and detached. We would have dinner in silence, exchanging just a few words now and then. I tried to keep the conversation going, talked about work, weekend plans, even mentioned our favorite movie that I planned to rewatch. But every time her responses felt strained, as if she were merely playing the role of an attentive wife. She started staying late at work more often, and when she came home, she seemed exhausted, as if she'd been fighting something inside all day. One time, I offered to pick her up after work, but she immediately declined, citing late meetings. Her voice was calm, but there was a barely noticeable hint of irritation, as if my offer weighed on her. On the evenings when she did come home early, her mood was unpredictable. Sometimes she seemed thoughtful and quiet, other times unnaturally cheerful, as if trying not to reveal her inner turmoil. I tried to joke around, but her smile felt empty. Even at night, lying next to her, I could feel her coldness. Her back was turned to me, her breathing steady but distant. I wanted to pull her close, touch her shoulder, feel the warmth that once felt so natural. But I hesitated, afraid that she was pulling away not just physically but emotionally too. I tried to start a conversation, but she responded briefly, as if hiding something. When I once again asked how her day went, Emma gave a nervous half-smile. "Everything's fine. Just a lot of work." Her voice sounded hollow, lacking its usual softness. I looked at her, trying to catch even the slightest hint of truth, but her face remained impassive, as if she herself had stopped understanding her own feelings. It felt as if our conversations had turned into those of strangers, mechanical and empty. I knew I shouldn't constantly suspect someone close, but something inside was tearing me apart. Her silence had become deafening, and even when she was right next to me, I felt lonelier than ever. Every evening, I caught myself glancing at her phone screen out of the corner of my eye whenever it lit up on the kitchen table. I didn't want to be like this. I didn't want to become someone who spies and doubts. But her coldness felt like it was pushing me out of her life. And with each passing day, I became more convinced that I no longer recognized the woman I loved. My thoughts became fixated on one thing, on Emma and her silence. Something inside wouldn't let me rest, and I realized I was losing control of myself. I picked up her phone while she was in the shower. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through her messages. Nothing suspicious. Just work conversations, project updates, a few short messages from Mike, dry, formal. Yet, it didn't put me at ease. On the contrary, the emptiness in the chats seemed unnatural, as if someone had deliberately erased any traces. I put the phone back in its place, but one question kept circling in my mind. If something really was going on between them, why was it so carefully hidden? Or was I just losing my mind, looking for something that wasn't there? Emma came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, and noticed my gaze. She smiled, her usual warm smile. But I no longer believed it. Behind that smile, there was something more. I could feel it. I tried to distract myself with work, with everyday chores, but I kept going over the same thoughts. Why had she changed? Why were her conversations so strained? I no longer recognized the woman I loved. And then I realized this obsession was slowly destroying me. I knew I had to stop, but I couldn't. Doubts clung to every little detail, and every look or gesture from her seemed like a hint at a lie. I couldn't just sit back anymore. My anxiety had turned into a quiet rage, and I decided to find out the truth. If I was wrong, so be it, at least I would find some peace. I found Mike's number in Emma's phone and called him. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweaty. When he picked up, I tried to speak calmly. "Hi, it's John, Emma's husband. I just wanted to know, you did talk to her about your problems with your wife, right?" Mike hesitated for a moment, then seemed to relax a bit. "Yeah, I did. Sorry if that's bothering you. It's just, things really haven't been great between Lisa and me." His voice sounded sincere, and for a moment I felt foolish. Maybe it really was just a figment of my imagination? We talked a bit about work, life, how tough it is to maintain a relationship after so many years. Then Mike suggested we meet in person, just to talk, share thoughts. I agreed. Oddly enough, the idea of finding an ally in this chaos brought me some relief. I hung up and thought, maybe Mike really just needed support? Maybe I was creating problems out of nothing? But something in his voice made me tense up. It was as if he was both open and a little cautious at the same time. The meeting with Mike went surprisingly calmly. We sat in a small cafe on the corner, and he talked about his problems with Lisa. He said she had grown distant, cold, and indifferent. I listened to him, but my thoughts kept circling around one question: why did Emma talk about him so often? Mike suggested something strange, that we both keep an eye on Lisa. He wanted to make sure she wasn't deceiving him and seemed genuinely convinced that the problem lay with her. I agreed, not because I wanted to pry into someone else's life, but because it gave me at least some sense of control. For the first few days, I tracked Lisa's movements through messages from Mike. Everything seemed ordinary: home, work, the store. But one evening, I noticed something odd. Mike wrote that Lisa was running late, and at the same time, Emma suddenly mentioned she would stay late at work. Suspicion flickered within me like a smoldering spark. I decided to check it out myself. I parked on the street near Emma's office and waited. My heart pounded heavily and rapidly, and my palms were sweaty. And then I saw her. Emma came out of the building and headed towards a car. Mike was in the driver's seat. She got in next to him and they drove off together. I watched as their silhouettes faded into the darkness and something inside me broke. A lie. Not Lisa, not someone else, it was her and Mike. I realized it at the moment I saw him gently place his hand on her shoulder. I don't remember how I made it home. Everything around me seemed unreal, like I was watching a movie with myself as the protagonist. One thought pulsed in my mind: they were together. Emma and Mike. All this time. When I got back, Emma wasn't home yet. I sat in the dark living room trying to process what had happened. My anger boiled inside, but along with it came emptiness. As if someone had drained all my strength. When she finally arrived, I couldn't stay silent. "How was your evening?" My voice trembled despite my efforts to sound calm. Emma froze for a moment but then gave a calm smile. "Oh, just busy. A lot of work. I'm tired." I looked at her, feeling something inside me tear apart. I couldn't bring myself to tell her I saw them. I wanted to hear the truth from her, but instead I asked, "Did you see Mike today?" She hesitated for a second but quickly replied, "No. He stayed late too, working on a project." A lie. Right to my face. I barely heard her words. I was just watching her take off her coat, put down her bag, casually adjust her hair. Every move seemed carefully rehearsed. I wanted to snap, to shout, to force her to admit it, but instead I just clenched my fists. Did she really think I didn't suspect anything? Or did she simply not care? Mike sent a message. I opened it without thinking. "I just wanted to see how much you suspect." She was going to tell you everything. Rage flared up like a bonfire. What right did he have to play with me? I felt like I was burning from the inside, but I couldn't even move. I trusted him. I trusted Emma. And now I didn't know who I hated more, her for the betrayal or myself for being so blindly trusting. After that evening, everything changed. Emma continued to act as if nothing had happened. She cooked dinner, asked about my day, talked about work. But I could no longer hear her words. One thought pounded in my mind: betrayal. I found myself scrutinizing her movements like a detective at a crime scene. I searched for signs of guilt, watched her face for any hint of sincerity. But everything seemed fake, contrived, like a poorly acted play. I tried to make sense of it all. Why did it hurt so much? Why couldn't I just confront her and shout that I knew the truth? But every time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck in my throat. Maybe because admitting it would destroy everything once and for all? Mike stopped messaging me. And that made me even angrier, as if he realized the game was up and decided to just disappear. I almost hoped for a message from him, some kind of explanation, but the phone remained silent. At night, I lay next to Emma and stared at the ceiling. She slept peacefully and I felt the heaviness build up in my chest. Was I really that blind? All this time, she had been lying to my face and I kept clinging to every little gesture, convincing myself that everything was fine. Now I couldn't hear her laugh without bitterness. I remembered how she talked about Mike with that softness in her voice, and I realized it wasn't compassion. It was admiration masked as care. And I started wondering, if I was so wrong about her, about our marriage, was it my fault too? Maybe I missed the moment when everything started falling apart? But even those thoughts brought no relief. I just wanted to understand how to move forward with this feeling that everything I believed in turned out to be a lie. I went outside in the middle of the night. The cold air stung my face and I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the heaviness. The city slept, the streetlights flickered lazily in the fog. I wandered down the empty streets, trying not to think, but my thoughts kept circling back to one question: how do I move on from here? Mike's words echoed in my head: she was going to tell you everything. But then why is Emma still silent? Is she afraid to confess or just buying time to come up with an excuse? I'm tired of guessing, tired of playing this game. I sat on a bench in the park, burying my head in my hands. Why didn't I lash out at her? Why am I still silent? Maybe because a part of me still hopes it's a mistake. Something inside me tightens when I imagine her telling the truth, admitting everything. I'm not ready for that. A passerby with a dog glanced at me cautiously and quickly walked away. I must look like a man who's lost everything. And in a way, that's true. Everything I built over the past 8 years turned out to be an illusion. On my way home, I caught myself thinking that I didn't feel anger anymore. Just emptiness. As if my heart was too tired to beat, too worn out to resist. I knew the conversation was inevitable. That sooner or later I would have to ask her directly. But right now, I just wanted silence. When I got back, Emma was asleep in our bed. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her. I wanted to wake her up, force her to confess, but instead I lay down on the couch. I didn't have the strength to confront her. The world I knew was falling apart, but I wasn't ready to leave it behind just yet. Maybe I was too afraid of change to let her go. Or maybe I feared the truth, the one that would shatter everything into pieces. I closed my eyes and realized that the most terrifying thing wasn't her betrayal, but my unwillingness to change anything. I had become part of this lie, clinging to the illusion. And perhaps that's my most bitter truth.